raid instance is going to be coming out in 6.2.
Yeah, this is the second boss in the instance, and a pretty cool looking boss.
Oh yeah.
He's not necessarily that difficult to deal with or anything. He is the second boss. He's not supposed to be very difficult. He's much more difficult than Butcher to deal with, let's just say that. But he looks amazing.
Yeah.
Well, she looks amazing. She's got loads of cool mechanics. It is a lady inside that big Iron Reaver shell, but yeah, really fucking cool. Very, very good boss.
So the people who are new to our sort of PTR style videos, in these videos, we only sort of discuss the bosses and we sort of give feedback and we talk about how the abilities work and how once it does hit live servers, how you potentially may need to deal with the abilities. But this isn't an official Fat Boss guide. As soon as these bosses are released on live, of course, other Fat Boss guides will be out and there will be a link to that in the description of this video. So the way that this encounter works really is that it's a two-phase encounter that has an air phase and a ground phase, and these just rotate on a timer. The boss will always start in its ground phase and its energy will slowly go up over time. Once it reaches 100%, she'll then switch into the air phase.
But before we get into the air phase, which is pretty fucking cool, we got to go to the ground phase, which is equally fucking cool. And the first ability we're going to talk about that the boss does is something called Immolation. And pretty much this isn't necessarily an ability, it's more of a byproduct of her other abilities. These are just patches of fire on the ground, and if you stand in the fire, you receive a ticking damage dot that stacks up. Don't stand in the fire, pretty bad, but this fire is really important because it is affected by other abilities.
For your tanks to worry about, you have to deal with something called artillery. Now, this will just place a debuff on the tank. Don't worry, it's not your traditional taunt on 2. That lasts for 13 seconds, and once the debuff does eventually run out, the boss will just fire a massive artillery shell at that player and will deal a huge amount of damage to your raid. However, the further that target with artillery is away from the raid, the less damage everyone will take. So the idea is that if you do get this debuff as a tank, the other tank taunts, you run the fuck away. It's kind of like Imperator Margok.
Yeah, a little bit.
In a way that you have to deal with it. But you have to deal with this throughout the entire phase 1. You just keep taunting and yeah, make sure that the shell's as far away from the raid as possible. Now there's another ability in play called Unstable Orb. These are actually really hard to sort of see. In all fairness, I didn't even notice them while we was actually doing the boss.
Yeah, well, I saw them a couple of times. They look very cool when they come out of the boss, but I guess it didn't help because, well, during PTR testing, there was quite a big bug that you couldn't actually see other players.
Yeah, you can't actually see any other players.
And if you did see the players are kind of hovering around the boss's hitbox or flying or... It was pretty broken,
yeah,
but the boss was pretty good. But yeah, this Unstable Orb mechanic, pretty much all it does is that the boss will fire an orb at a player's location, and what it will do, it will put a dot on that player as well as any other player within 8 yards, and it just stacks up. So the idea is that all your ranged players should be spread by 8 yards in order to make sure that you don't get a ridiculous amount of stacks from this ability.
Now the main ability that you really need to worry about in this ground phase is an ability called Barrage. What the boss will do is it will just target any player in the entire raid. The boss will just face towards that target, will do a short cast, and then send out a massive cone of fire. If you're hit by this fire, it will pretty much instantly kill you. The amount of damage it does is absolutely crazy. So if you just look at the boss, as soon as he starts casting this and you move early, you should be absolutely fine. What we actually did to sort of like counter this ability is that we had our entire raid spread around the boss. Of course, you can't actually see that because
yeah,
we can't
invisible.
even see that. But the rest of our raid team told us that they were spread. So that's what we did, and it seemed to work.
Now the boss goes full XT deconstructor at some point and goes crazy by casting an ability called Pounding. This is a 6-second cast that does quick bursty damage to the entire raid. Now this ability will come in 3 times per ground phase, so you need to set up healer cooldowns for each and every one. And it does line up for the next time she goes into the ground phase. Your first set of CDs will be ready for the first pounding, and then the second and the third. So just set up 3-minute CDs for these and you'll be absolutely fine. When this ability is cast, it will also push back any of the immolation fires from around the boss. So do take care of that. It's somewhat hard to see exactly how it moves. It's a little bit buggy at the moment, especially on the PTR. But either way, just make sure you move from the fire. It's bad.
And the last ability that she'll actually use in this phase is something called Blitz, which is absolutely awesome. What the boss will do is that she'll target a random player. Again, it does only seem to be ranged and healers, and she will zoom towards them. If you're hit by this ability, she'll actually pick you up, and you'll travel with her. Now, as you may imagine, this of course does do damage to you. It'll also apply a fire damage dot to you, which will stack, and she'll cast Blitz twice in a row. So as soon as the first one's done, she'll immediately cast another one afterwards. One interesting thing to know about this ability is that if she charges through fire, it'll actually move the fire out the way. So you might even be able to use this in some way. I don't know if you wanted to clear fire. Didn't seem that important on Heroic, maybe on Mythic. But simply just make sure you avoid the charge and you'll be absolutely fine. So as soon as you manage to deal with all those abilities, which took us a little while, but once we did, you will finally get into the air phase at 100 energy. And this is where some more interesting things happen.
So what she'll do, she'll fly up into the air and take 95% reduced damage. The whole idea is that while she is flying around doing all of these crazy abilities and shit, you shouldn't really be focusing on her, you should be focusing on dealing with other mechanics. Now, artillery is still in from the first phase, you know, the tank debuff they had to run away with. However, now it is on 3 random players. So what they need to do, these 3 random players, is that they need to get the fuck away from the raid, which is really hard when you can't see the raid. But either way, check your mini-map, everyone, and get the fuck away from the raid. Pop a cooldown and see what you can do. Now, in the dungeon journal, it did say that during this phase, it would be doing less damage. However, it was a little bit weird on PTR, but we can assume that it won't be one-shotting your players if they haven't got some sort of DR. But either way, when you are out, make sure you put a DR down and you'll be absolutely fine, and then just return to the group.
Now, while she's up in the air, she won't only just be doing these artillery strikes on players, she'll also do something called Fuel Streak. This will just coat an entire line from one side of the room to the other in just like patches of fuel. Now, if you stand in this fuel, it won't actually do any damage to you at all, but it will slow you, which is quite important to note because you need to get out of these patches really, really quickly, because almost immediately afterwards, she'll send down another line directly on top of that, which will ignite all of the patches. If you're stood inside these patches, of course, it is fire, and it is World of Warcraft, which means you're going to be taking a shit ton of damage. So the idea is that you just simply move from them.
Now, just after she's ignited this giant line of fuel, she'll then cast something called fire bombs. When she does this, she will target seemingly random areas of the room, it seems to be generally around the middle, and spawn 4 bombs. Now, if you stand in these targeting circles, when they land, you take a little bit of damage, so don't stand where the bombs are going to land. Come on, that's just common sense. But once the bomb have formed, you have 45 seconds to kill them. And if you fail to kill them within that time, they'll detonate, and they'll do a ton of damage to your raid, as well as spawn fire patches. And if 4 of these go off at the exact same time, you're pretty much going to be one shot unless you have all the cooldowns in the world and really want to be using them for pounding anyway in the ground phase. So kill bombs. You're not doing any damage to the boss. Just kill the bombs. It's very, very simple. On the PTR, bless them, they had like 200k
They had
health.
no health.
I assume it just wasn't scaled
it
properly.
wasn't scaled very
it
well.
was very, very cute.
So you can assume once this does hit live, those bombs are going to
be a little bit harder to kill.
Yeah. Now, after the boss has actually done 3 sets of lines and, of course, 3 sets of bombs, she will then actually target a random player, and she will cast an entirely new ability called Falling Slam. And this is basically the end of the air phase. When she casts this ability, she'll create a massive 30-yard circle around that player. And if you're stood in this circle by the time the cast is finished, so once she's actually put her feet on the ground, it will do so much damage to you that you'll pretty much be one hit. It hits you for well over 1 million, so there's no way you're going to survive this. So the idea is that if it does target you, you quickly run out the circle. When she does finally land, she will actually do damage to everyone in the entire room. But if you're out that circle, you'll survive. It doesn't deal enough to kill you.
Now, when she lands, she'll also push all the fire away from that location. So if you wanted to, you could use this as a way of clearing an area for where you want to fight her again in the ground phase. So it's entirely up to you where you want her to land. She'll probably just land on someone who's not in the right place anyway, because you know how that works. But yeah, very simple. Move out of the giant fucking circle where the boss is going to land and you'll be fine.
And then from this point, really the encounter just repeats itself. It just goes straight back into phase 1, and it's literally the same fight all the way through. So in conclusion, this encounter,
it looks really, really cool.
It's pretty incredible. I'm not going to lie. It's really looking good for this next tier. I mean, of course, it's only the first boss, but it's a really, really good start. The boss herself, the only complaint I would have is like some of the animations with the fires are a bit off, especially when they're being pushed away with certain abilities such as the Falling Slam, the Blitz, and the Pounding. Like, I was stood in some fires and not even taking damage, and then I'd be out of fires and taking damage from fires.
Yeah,
there were certain situations like that. But of course, it is the PTR. That is perhaps things that will be improved. I'd also say that the overlapping on the shells is a little bit awkward for the tanks. I don't think it's necessary for it to be that awkward.
Yeah,
because the timings
you can deal with it, of course.
You can deal with it. There's ways of dealing with it, but it's just...
It's a little awkward, especially because it's just a heroic boss. But yeah, you definitely can deal with it. But of course, really just to make this fight work, of course, seeing the rest of your raid would be great. But bombs in phase 2, of course, we all know. They will have way more health, of course. There's no way that they're supposed to have that much health. But they've definitely got to become a thing to deal with, because really, all of the DPS were just sitting around in phase 2. There was nothing to do except move from shit and move out when you have the artillery strike. But yeah, overall, I think this boss is really good. The spectacle of it is worth fighting.
Incredible, yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. And considering this is the second boss in the instance and the first one that we've seen, I'm really looking forward to the other bosses. It's going to be awesome.
But anyway, that's all we got time for in this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this little PTR preview, then please do make sure that you give us a like. It helps us out so much. And of course, we'll see you on the live stream. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.